ICE, and there are counties in our state and localities that are diverting the resources from keeping their own communities safe to helping with that effort. And I just want to reshift the focus to make sure we're doing job number one, that we're not being deputized as federal ICE agents, because ICE certainly has a big enough budget, $85 billion up from $6 billion a few years ago. So in my judgment, they have enough resources. They can do what they want. We have limited resources. We're the only ones focused on protecting our local communities, and that's why we're talking about our legislation to shift the focus back where it belongs all across the state. So we want to make sure that our jails are not being used for ICE detention centers, and our sheriffs who, have reasons to do it that are more financial than other reasons. We'll certainly have conversations with them. I want you to know we've supported our sheriffs and we can do more. I don't want to have local police being forced to do the job of ICE. And I also want to make sure that warrants are signed by a judge. Again, someone has a warrant signed by a judge, that's the gold standard. That means someone else has looked at this as opposed to someone who may not have even had a lot of training, and certainly not training in conflict de-escalation the way all the members of your forces I know are. I know this. And so we'll always cooperate with the federal government, always, to solve crimes, prevent crimes, and fight crime. But at this point, that's not what's going on here. That's not what's happening in our country, in our state. So I want to hear from some select members of law enforcement, and I want to have a really intense conversation about this, certainly in the course of this morning, about what our options are, what else we can do. We want to also ban ICE from going into sensitive locations, so you don't have to worry about schools and daycare centers and hospitals and courtrooms and places for education. People should not have that fear. But also, if people's constitutional rights have been violated, that just like if someone alleges constitutional rights being violated by a state or local officer, there are consequences. I don't know why the federal government should exempt itself in the state of New York from those, if those actions lead to that. So, Dr. Popkin, if you could lead off in the conversation. I know you've got some individuals we want to hear from directly. And I thank all of you for coming here. You all have really important jobs back home. But this is a conversation I think needs to happen right now, and your voices mean everything to me.
Thank you, Governor. Thanks to the Governor's record investments and initiatives, DCGS has been hard at work supporting thousands of on-the-ground partners in law enforcement and the community. As the Governor mentioned, since she took office, she's secured $3 billion in public safety funding, and these efforts have successfully dropped shootings to record lows last year and have dropped violent crime by double digits. As the Governor mentioned, the public expects law enforcement to respond when crimes occur, to solve those crimes, to proactively engage with the communities to build public trust, to help people in moments of danger, and increasingly to reverse overdoses and respond to mental health crises. What the public does not expect, and has never expected, is for local police to act as civil immigration authorities, detaining people on behalf of the federal government without a legitimate law enforcement purpose or connection to public safety. We're joined here today by distinguished leaders from across the state who share your values and your vision for making New York safer. I'd like to turn first to District Attorney Tony Jordan from Washington County. As a district attorney, what does this legislation mean for DAs and assistant district attorneys as they continue to work with police on building criminal cases and holding people who commit crimes accountable?
Thank you. First I'd like to start by thanking the Governor for having this important conversation and keeping it going, because I think there's no one that would disagree that violent criminals, if they're here illegally, should be deported. Certainly people who commit crimes, we have to have the ability to first hold them accountable. If they're convicted and they're here illegally, they should serve their sentence here and then be deported and suffer whatever consequences come. I think what we were hearing over the past year around the state, and we're starting to see locally more and more, is the reality of a perception, right? So whether it's actual or whether it's perceived or actual, it's very real to our victims and to our witnesses, where there is fear of coming forward, there is fear seeking help. And I think one thing that gets lost in all this is for the past 4 years, 5 years, either with tacit approval or actual approval of the government, vast numbers of people came to this country and wanted to make a start and were assimilated into their communities. And to now be suffering the concern of being deported simply for coming forward to report a crime or to stand up is having significant impacts on our efforts across the state to deal with trafficking, to deal with victimization of our most vulnerable. So I think these efforts alone would go a long ways toward addressing that, to allow us to hold the most violent of our offenders accountable. So for that reason alone, I really appreciate your efforts in this regard.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and we're also in cases where, in some counties downstate, people who are charged with crimes but have not paid their debt to society are being returned to their home countries without any consequences. Someone who rapes a teenager, true story. The perpetrator does not meet his fate in a jail in this state, but they're being sent back, not to a jail, but sent back to their home country, perhaps to inflict the same horrific crime on someone there, or to find their way back here and do it again. And that's also problematic in addition to what you're raising about the fear of even coming and reporting crimes. And we can't have that. That's not how we can keep society safe. So thank you so much for sharing that perspective.
Thank you. I'm going to switch to Sheriff Craig Apple, my sheriff here in Albany County. As a sheriff, how do you use your resources and those provided by the state to keep people safe in this county and focus on those clear threats to public safety? In other words, how are you focusing local policing resources on the local problems?
So first of all, thank you, Governor, for bringing us all together, and thank you, Dr. Popkin. So first of all, thank you for dumping billions of dollars into public safety. Your investment, you have no idea that the people you've touched, the lives you've saved by that investment. Here in Albany County, we've got a great crime analysis center. We've dumped millions of dollars into the LE Tech grants for whether it's in-car videos or body-worn cameras or drone capabilities to keep people safe. And the additional funds that you've personally bestowed on Albany County to help reduce crime in Albany has taken dozens and dozens of guns off the street and pounds of illicit narcotics off the street, and the lives you've saved by result of removing those drugs. So I firmly stand here beside you. I will stand right with you to denounce what has gone on. This is really sad times, and all the trust that we've worked so hard to build can be eroded very quickly, and hopefully this will stop that.
You mentioned a key word, trust. That's the essence of a positive relationship with the community. They have to trust law enforcement. And what you're seeing in a place like Minnesota and has been in other cities and probably many more is that the public is not distinguishing between local law enforcement, state law enforcement, federal law enforcement, and the ICE intervention. And so it's really breaking down the bonds that have been worked on so hard by many of your departments to maintain that trust. And it's so fragile, and it seems like it's gone now. And so it just makes your jobs harder to get people to trust your local sheriffs and local police officers. And that's another part of the collateral damage of what this 1 year has been about. So thank you, Sheriff. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Sheriff Toby Shelley, Onondaga County, how are you staying focused on kind of the current public safety threats in Onondaga County and using your resources and the state resources to kind of tackle those problems?
Governor, Dr. Popkin, thanks for putting this together. I think oftentimes listening is more important than talking. It's good to listen. Onondaga County, we have great partners with the state police. Steve James has been great with us and his people. Syracuse Police, Chief Russin. And whether it's Strive fighting that domestic violence or Give fighting the gun issue we have in Onondaga County, we're very effective at using those funds for those things. And I'll give you a great example. In September, I was personally on a Give detail. Great video. I'm not sure if I can show it to you or not. Probably could because you're the governor. But we took a murder suspect off the street. We got his gun, we got his drugs, and we got all his money. So we're definitely using that money. Thank you.
No, really glad to hear that. Really glad to hear that.
Chief Russin, good to see you again from my hometown city of Syracuse. As a chief of a major upstate city, I've got a similar question for you, which is, what are the public safety efforts that you're most proud of in the city, and how are you hoping to kind of double down on them as you assume your chiefship?
Thank you. Thank you, Governor, for having me here. I think Sheriff Shelley hit on something that's very important. It's really the partnership that has been going so well with DCJS, the Governor's Office, and State Police, and we've been working very hard with the funding that we have been getting through GIVE and STRIVE. You know, the GIVE funding has certainly helped us. There was a 40% reduction in homicides last year and a 21% reduction in Part 1 crimes, which is really historic, and the funding is helping us now with intimate partner violence through the STRIVE program. But other changes have been instrumental. Retail theft was a very, very big problem in Syracuse. Destiny USA was really struggling, and so we partnered with the state police and the sheriff's office through some funding that came. And we've had a 70% reduction in retail theft just at Destiny, and those were businesses that were closing up because they couldn't sustain the theft that was occurring there. And at the same time, you know, now when I talk to the managers and loss prevention officers, they will say they feel safe coming back to work, and so people are feeling safer, and that perception of going to work and some of the safe places that we've talked about is very important as well too. So can't thank you enough for the funding, but also to the partnerships with the state police and the sheriff's office, DCJS, and a lot of other folks that are in this room.
And that's with your counties being laser focused on fighting crime as opposed to becoming ICE officers. That is what I'm seeing around the state. You keep your focus where it needs to be, the numbers start improving dramatically from what we had seen over even 4 years ago. And I think that's just a lesson of where our priorities are. And the federal government, in my judgment, it's an extreme overreach, but certainly don't put pressure on localities here in the state of New York. We have 14 law enforcement agencies, 10 county sheriff's offices, 1 county police department, and 3 municipal police departments that are operating under agreements known as 287Gs. It's 287G of the immigration law, but it also says it must be subject to state law in order for you to have those agreements. And so we are proposing changing state laws, as have other states, to basically say that there's no compromising on our strong desire to work with the federal government to stop criminals and deport criminals. You're going to hear others say that's not true, and I'm telling you right now it is true, because we've already done that. We've already deported over 1,400 people because we cooperated, and even out of our jails, our prisons. So we are focused on that. We'll help with that. Give us, U.S. Marshal wants us to hold somebody for ATF or FBI, and there's crimes. We're there. Always have been, always will be. But to know that the vast, vast majority of people being arrested by ICE have no connection to crime, and to expect even have 14 law enforcement entities in the state of New York using their resources, and again, many of these resources are coming from the state. The state is providing a lot of help here. And I think it's inappropriate that there be this diversion of that away from the core mission, which is to keep New Yorkers safe. And so I wanted to just have a conversation with that. But at this point,
Yeah, I think we're, one more question.
Yep.
So Chief Tommy Champion, building off of the governor's talking about trust, the governor was in Buffalo last week touting the outstanding progress made by the city of Buffalo, where really safety has been co-created between law enforcement and the community they serve. Can you speak a little bit to the role of community engagement and public trust in Buffalo to not only help people be safe, but also feel safe?
Absolutely. And first of all, thank you, Joe, for the question. And Governor, thank you for everything you've done for the city of Buffalo and New York State. With the gun-involved violence elimination program, we've been able to shore up a lot of our programs and a lot of our strategies that we've seen were already effective in the city of Buffalo. It was a combination of patrols, active directed patrols, walking patrols, even business check-ins, having officers go and drive in those areas and check in on area businesses to be able to reduce the amount of larcenies and crimes that are happening indoors, and also increase our presence for community members who are shopping and engaged in activities inside local establishments. But also with our community policing, making arrests, our investigations increasing on those things, but also outreach and making sure that we were more present in those communities and we were engaging with community members and not just there to be able to deter crime, but actually engage with the community members and be able to have contact interactions with them. We found the more interactions we had, the more intel that we received. And that intel was able to then feed some of our other more tactical realms of law enforcement and to be able to better serve the people. We're more efficient the more information we're able to get from our citizens, and the more information we get is based on and contingent on the relationships that we have with those citizens. We have a very diverse population in Buffalo, New York, and our largest growing population are new Americans. And to be able to serve all of our communities and to serve them appropriately and efficiently, we've got to have good relationships with our community members in every sector, every part of every district in our city. And so our community policing efforts have been able to do that. We've really improved our overall relationships with our community members. We take part in tons of events and programs, initiatives. You'll see our officers even taking part in fun little challenges with teens. You'll see them on YouTube, doing different programs with teens. And it all goes towards building that rapport and building that relationship, which serves the overall purpose of community building and also getting information from the citizens to better serve them every single day.
Because your members are not deputized to be ICE agents, these individuals feel more comfortable to come forward and to report crimes and to be witnesses and to help keep the city safe.
Yes, ma'am.
I think one of the clear things from talking to everybody over the last 2 weeks has been that the number one things that law enforcement said was we have to talk to our communities first about what's happening in Minneapolis and across the country and make sure that we're staying focused on keeping people safe in our communities. So with that, I think we're going to pause there and take some on-topic questions before continuing our discussion.
And I just want to say, as evidenced today in our event in New York City and others who are using their voices from their, really important elected positions, many of them, support is growing for our initiative to ban these agreements in the state of New York. And we're continuing to have conversations, if there's something that we're missing, something we're overlooking, something that needs to be said or established or changed. This is the places I'm learning it from the experts and the people I trust the most with the protection of our citizens and our residents. So, Carol?
Good morning, Governor. Jordan Sartor Francis, correspondent with Nexstar. Ahead of the Local Cops, Local Crimes Act, were there any conversations with DHS or ICE? I don't want to call it working as a team, that's not what you want to do, but were there any conversations with the federal government, ICE, between your office, your staff, yourself?
Well, we certainly coordinate with them all the time when it comes to removing criminals. We have a strong relationship for those specific cases. But this is something that's, by federal law, is left to the prerogative of the states to decide whether or not these agreements can be in your state. It is up to the state. That is crystal clear in the law. I reread it yesterday.
So, Governor, when are you introducing, or when will this language become public, and when do you expect the legislature to take it on? And also, I was curious, did you discuss this with President Trump?
Now, again, this is up to the states to decide if we want to do it this way. I have complained about the overreach in enforcement. In fact, I've called for Kristi Noem's resignation or firing or her departure because this is an agency that, while started with good intentions back in 2003 after 9/11, the way it's been weaponized against Americans in the last 1 year calls for those of us in our positions to stand up and do what I can to do to protect the people living in this state. I don't need permission from Donald Trump or the federal government to do what I know is important to protect the people of my state. And the timing on that, is it? No, the timing, the legislature, they have a working group. We're talking all the time about, what we put together, and we're going to work closely with the legislature on this, but I think this will be, I'll find out for sure if this is going to be put in 30 days or whether we're going to do it as a program bill. I think there's still some questions on that, but I want to do it soon. I mean, this is unfolding in our state right now, and I do not want these to expand. I want to make sure that we can curtail what is happening, and just to get us in a place where, public safety, local police, local crimes is our refocus again, not being agents of an agency that absolutely needs to be reformed, retrained. Members need to be retrained and rethought about. But for now, this is where we are.
So also, can you discuss how this is different from some of the more progressive members of the legislature pushing for New York for All? I've heard them say that they are concerned that even without a 287G agreement, local police can still share information with ICE officers, or also, allow them into government facilities, or local police can also ask about an immigration status. Does this change anything like that?
No, we were having conversations with the legislature. They have not thus far passed New York for All, even in last session. So I will look at whatever actually gets passed by the legislature. I mean, that's subject to their own modifications, et cetera. So I know what path I'm on, but very much having conversations with the legislature on other ideas, whether it's, as I mentioned, there's other elements of what we're doing here as well. Giving people who've had their constitutional rights trampled on, whether it's a business in Cato where there was this, and I went right afterward, this shocking display of raw power bursting into a factory where about 152 people were working and separating people in the break room based on the color of their skin. White over here, black and brown over here is literally what the owners of the company told me. So, or whether it's members of the media, being prevented from covering or being roughed up when they're down at 26 Federal Plaza. There are a lot of people's rights are being trampled on right now, and I want to make sure they have that right of action, as well as reestablishing our sensitive locations. That used to be the case, and the Trump administration decided to go back to a time when, people's rights were trampled on, unfettered, unrestrained. This has been unleashed, and it needs to be put back.
Two on-topic questions. The first being, I'm noticing, you're having this conversation up here, you had a conversation downstate. There's still some faces that are missing from these conversations, namely, a lot of the leaders of the counties who have proactively signed these agreements. I'm wondering what kind of conversations you've had with them. And then secondly, you sort of spoke to this, kind of constitutional issue, people having their rights being trampled. The other, kind of piece of this conversation is what happens when your rights are trampled by federal officials, and how do local officials deal with that and police that? I know there's some suggestions in the legislature. I know that you obviously backed the private right of action, but there's a proposal to potentially make that actually a crime that the state could police violations of constitutional rights. I'm wondering where you stand on that, and whether any of the gathered officials here want to.
Similar to other pieces of legislation that aren't passed yet, I need to see what the final product is. I really do, and this is an enormous crisis that is unfolding in our nation, and we're trying to do what we can here in New York. We have had some horrific situations. A teenager in Nassau County taken out of his high school, sitting in a jail right now. We have 2 teenage boys about to go back to a country they don't know at all because their mother was taken from that factory that I discussed in Cato. In my office, a 6th grade boy crying in my arms because his mother had abandoned the family years ago. He's being raised by a warm, loving father, he and his brother. And I think that father is now in a detention center in Michigan. And he just wanted to tell his dad in person that he made honor roll, that he's working hard. And he was uncontrollably sobbing. So we're going to focus on this in every way we can. This is one that is very apparent to me, where we have the right to do this. I'm also, again, protecting people's constitutional rights. I want to protect sensitive locations. But I am also open to other ways that we can find a path to protect the people in this state. Again, focused on removing those who are committing crimes or have committed a crime before they came here. And we're not saying open up the borders, but we're saying let's have a heart. Let's not lose who we are, even if sometimes it feels like the country is going off the rails. We're not doing that here in New York. We know who we are.
What kind of conversations have you had with the leaders of those counties that have been proactively working with ICE?
They're not here. They might all be at a meeting in Nassau County as we speak.
Invited?
I don't know who was invited. I think they're focused on upstate.
First of all, I want to say that this is a failure of federal government to just simply compromise, something our country has been doing a great job of, maybe up until the last 10 or 15 years. But in Broome County, we do have an agreement. It was signed by the sheriff. It does not use there's no resources being used. There's no deputies that go out and knock on doors or anything like that. Right now, under this agreement, they are working, they will take ICE detainees with active criminal warrants signed by a judge. In 2024, there was a Peruvian gang member who was arrested in Endicott, New York, birthplace of IBM, for 23 murders, all right? I think everybody can agree that those are the people that we should be going after. Those are the people that should be held accountable, that we should work together. What's happened over the last few months is despicable. I think most people see the overreach. I'll speak for my community that has seen somebody, a Peruvian gang member, arrested and pulled out by ICE, that almost just about everybody supported that. What's been going on the last couple weeks, people absolutely do not support. I've read the governor's legislation. The spirit of it is what's going on right now, which should be that the overreach needs to end. People have to have their constitutional rights. But yes, we should also be able to work to get people who are convicted of 23 murders and don't belong in this country held accountable and out of our communities.
Just to wrap up, Grace, no, I've not spoken to every one of the elected officials who have one of these, but I did speak to one, and they're in the process of winding it down, understanding that this has gone too far. And those who also, reading the tea leaves, may want to start that process. But this was before our law just kind of had enough. And so I have had conversations individually. I just don't want to single people out here.
And just building on Grace's question, so how do you deal with them? I mean, there seems to be a lot of cooperation around here and your other panel. How do you deal with those agencies that don't want to cooperate with this, that want to continue to cooperate with ICE and with the federal government?
Right. This is where the state law would take precedence over local preference, and the Attorney General's office would be empowered to enforce, as she does with other laws of the state of New York, to ensure full compliance. Thanks for coming.